I went on this journey of being a published author and being at book signing events and community events and podcasts like this and talking to people, I started having opportunity to talk about those speech sound disorders. And over again, I had people talking to me about their own speech differences, about a child or grandchild's speech differences. And then to my great delight, I kept hearing from speech language pathologists who were buying what the seal saw to use in their practices. So I just felt like the universe was talking to me. So I said, okay, I'm going to write this book.
Hey there, and welcome to the Speechy Side Up podcast. My name is Vanita Litvack, and I am so grateful you're here. I'm an ASHA certified speech language pathologist, author, and augmentative and alternative communication consultant who is obsessed with helping SLPs like you stop reinventing the wheel and connect with other SLPs in the trenches. Have you ever wondered how other SLPs seem to be doing it all with ease? Well, around here, you'll get to hear firsthand how SLPs are really getting things done while keeping evidence-based practice and self-care in mind. Think of this as a coffee date with your SLP friends. Get ready to be challenged and encouraged while we learn together. Today, I'm joined by Sherry McMillan, author of My S's Are Messes. A funny thing happened after Sherry McMillan published her acclaimed book, What the Seal Saw. Speech language pathologists started reaching out to her that they were using the book in their practices. In connecting with her readers, she found that many of them, like her, had speech sound disorders. She was encouraged to write a book specifically for children with speech differences and those who love and support them. So she did. My S's Are Messes is a book that she wishes she had written when she was a child. Sherry McMillan is an author, speaker, technologist, and avid kayaker. Sherry, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you so much for having me, Vanita.
So let's go ahead and dive in. Tell us about your book and what inspired you to write it and where it's available.
Excellent. So yeah, I think the best way to start is to start by the first book that I wrote. And so when I wrote the children's poetry and picture book, What the Seal Saw, that is a book about that moment where you see an animal in nature and you wonder if they see you too. And we follow this seal on an adventure. So that's a different story, but I knew right away or very early in the process that the right name for this book, the right title, is What the Seal Saw. And almost immediately, I sort of laughed at that and thought, oh my goodness, what have I done? I've been avoiding S's my whole life. I'm finally going to become a published author, and I'm choosing to really lean into the S's. And I have several speech sound disorders, the most obvious of which is a lisp. I could only say the sound S at 27 for the first time. So it's been a journey, right? And I just decided that no, this is the right title for the book, and that's what we're going to do. But in that sort of, talking to myself, I did think like, oh my goodness, my S's are messes. What have I done? And right away I thought, well, that's something. That's a good title. And I kind of tucked that aside. And then as I went on this journey of being a published author and being at book signing events and community events and podcasts like this and talking to people, I started having opportunity to talk about those speech sound disorders. So quite often what that might look like is it would be later in the day. And I would say to someone, please bear with me. I'm getting a little tired. I'm starting to stutter now. Or please bear with me. I'm having trouble hearing you over the background music, something like that. And over again, I had people talking to me about their own speech differences, about a child or grandchild's speech differences. And then to my great delight, I kept hearing from speech language pathologists who were buying what the seal saw to use in their practices. So I just felt like the universe was talking to me. So I said, okay, I'm going to write this book. And I would run the title by people, and people always laughed, but they always laughed in like a really good-natured way. So the germ of My S's Are Messes was born. And then you asked me to tell you a little bit about the book. So we mentioned in the intro that it's the book I wished I'd had as a child. So why? What was missing in my childhood that I thought I could maybe provide now? And it's really that empathy. And more than anything, I wanted to provide a discussion point from the point of view from a person that has speech sound disorders and what that's like. And then more than anything, I wanted to kind of make it light, make it not heavy, make it no big deal. So one of the things that this book does is it shows the children doing everything right and working really extra hard, and it's the sounds that are misbehaving, and they're just kind of
Mhm.
doing funny little naughty things like bouncing on beds or reading under the covers. But the children are doing everything right, and the sounds are misbehaving.
I love that perspective. And I love how it's like
Mhm.
separating the kids from the work that they're doing. And, it is part of neurodiversity. So it is like how the brain is communicating with the motor system, and it doesn't always cooperate in the way that they want it to. So I love that. Like you wrote it from your perspective.
Thank you. Yes. And it was really a fascinating process to even examine what that perspective is. So we got to the point in the book where we were ready to storyboard, and I had this fantastic illustrator that I work with, and I didn't want to pigeonhole her, but she was saying to me, no, like describe what it's like. And so some of the early ideation was like, well, what if they're jumping over hurdles? What if they're waiting at a bus stop? What if they're trying to drive and they don't put the brakes on? Like just all of these word pictures. And the more I spoke about it, and the more I spoke to others, because there was a phase two where I'm putting it in front of other people with speech sound disorders or any sort of speech difference, persons with autism, ADHD, Down syndrome, articulation errors, apraxia, stroke survivors, all that community, right? Which, and again, as we
Mhm.
go, the community gets larger and larger and larger. And so one of the themes is like, we're not alone, and we're definitely not alone. There's a lot of us, and there's a lot of variations on that theme, right? But it was really validating and encouraging and uplifting to see these word pictures come to life. I recently had the joy of being able to read to a group of children at a school for children with speech and hearing challenges. And as I'm turning the pages, they're nodding and they're giggling, and I'm like, yes, 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 we got it.
Yeah, that's important to see that they're connecting with a story. So tell us about using word pictures to communicate what it feels like to have a speech sound disorder.
Right. So that was such an important part of the journey. And so I'll just share some of the illustrations with you because that's the most helpful. So one of the things that we wanted to do was to have our images be really energetic and show movement. So we wanted for the letters to sort of be running away and
Mhm.
doing goofy things. So this is like my word picture, what it feels like to stutter. So you'll notice in this picture, the child's really trying hard to articulate the sound. And in this case, the stuttering on the T. And the T's being a goof and just having a really great time, sticks the
Mhm.
landing. It's like, the T doesn't mind that we're struggling, right? The T is just like off and running and doing its thing and having fun. And then, we've got this image of like spilt milk. So there's a whole also sort of subtlety around being really classic. And one of the reasons behind that was really heartfelt is speaking with a lot of seniors who, even I'm 54 at the time of this recording. The world is a really different place for me from when I had speech therapy, when I had my challenges and was really bullied, frankly, as a child. But people a generation or two older have even more heartbreaking stories. And so, sort of a nod to them and also to talk about the universality of the book and of the experience, we went with like a retro palette and we did things that were really quite classic, like I mentioned before, the bouncing in beds and the being under covers. So the sounds are real characters, and the challenges that we go through are meant to sort of articulate like what is it like? It's like a tug of war in the night. It's like jumping over hurdles. It's like playing hide and seek. So this was really special for us to think about everyday common occurrences, validate, normalize it, but then also give a nod to the children and everybody who's working really hard.
That's really nice. I love like that perspective. So how does having a speech sound disorder inform the way you work with the public?
Right. Well, it's such a journey. And one of the big lessons in the book is, first of all, that there's some real benefits of having a speech difference. And for me, I think the front runner is it just makes you such a patient listener. I'm not the most patient person in
Mhm.
general, but I have become, a really great listener, especially when people are struggling to articulate. what they mean. And so if we go back to word pictures, probably my favorite word picture is where we have a child that's wrestling, right? So we kind of wrestle with our sounds sometimes. And, they become a world champion listener. Right?
That's great.
And I think that that's really a benefit. Before I was, well, and during, but my other career is in technology, and I really specialize in business analysis in the technology industry. And it's really fascinating for me how those two worlds collide. And I think had I not had speech challenges, I probably would not have become a business analyst, because the art of listening to what people are saying or not saying or what they mean, or just being patient with the process, because you have to go down further steps. They have the methodology of the 5 whys, which I think many of us probably just ask 27 whys on every issue just naturally. I was definitely one of those children that asked why on everything. But the idea of needing to work through a situation, and in technology, it's quite often like, what is the real business problem to solve? What is the real business opportunity to realize? But, what are our real project goals? You might articulate it like, well, I need Outlook calendar, but do you really need Outlook with calendar, right? And so that kind of precision around how we communicate was really honed by being a person who different. So we as a community learn how to be economical and precise with our words. And especially if you also have hearing challenges, it's really important that you articulate. It's really important that you don't spiral into a lot of words without very much meaning. And then that's a lot of energy spent trying to understand that could be better spent elsewhere. So I do find like that whole community of people with speech sound disorders, we're very, very precise about how we communicate, and we're very intentional about our words. We're very clear, and we're also very accommodating to the other person to make sure that we're hearing them. And I think, in so many instances of we as a race, the human race, are thinking about diversity and inclusion, one of the great principles we find over and over and over again is that if we make accommodations for one group, we end up helping others. So the classic one is for a sidewalk that has a cutout for persons in wheelchairs. And then we find that everyone from cyclists to people with a stroller to people with canes to the everyday person, rollerblades, whatever it may be, we all benefit from that cutout, right? And so the same thing I think applies to those of us in the speech and hearing community. As we accommodate each other and understand that better, I think we can all become better communicators. So that has definitely informed the way I work. I feel like being transparent that I have a speech difference and talking about it, asking for a little patience, asking for a little understanding, it really brings out the best in others too. I found like so often people are like really accommodating. And I really see it when I'm out in the retail world. People are rushed, they're busy, they're trying to balance a bunch of things, and they can tend to be a little short. And then if you ask for an accommodation, immediately they stop and they provide it, and they're very happy to do so. And then that's like oftentimes where I hear the stories too about, oh, my grandpa just had a stroke, or my niece has Down syndrome and has speech delays. And then we end up having a wonderful conversation about it.
That's a really great perspective and tip, I think, for anybody who wants to be a more active listener. It does, like, communication is a two-way street, so maybe asking for those accommodations is a great place to start. I love that. So you mentioned that you work a little bit with speech language pathologists. How do you work with them and other experts in the creation of your book?
Right. That was such a great journey for me. So as I went through the process and I knew, okay, I have this title and I have this concept, and now I know, okay, this is the next book I'm going to write. And I'm actually writing it, and we're storyboarding and doing all the illustrations and all that normal part of writing, publishing, not quite yet at sales and marketing. I realized, boy, I need to bring in experts. And I mentioned that I'd already had people who were speech language pathologists that were encouraging me to write the book. And so in some cases, I've reached out and said, like, when I'm ready, can I run it by you? And can we talk about it, right? And so the first question I started with was, have I got the terminology right? So I was raised at a time where we referred to them as speech impediments. I knew that speech impairments was another term. And then I was pleasantly surprised to know that we don't use either of those anymore. Now we say speech difference. I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. And that was sort of like the thin edge of the wedge of understanding that the world of speech language pathology, thankfully, had really opened up and had a different way of thinking about it. And then sidebar, when I go into schools and work with schools, I'm really just blown away to hear children share with me their experience of going to speech therapy, and it's so different and it's so much more pleasant. I felt really isolated, really, there was a spotlight on me. I really felt pulled out. And of course, the children can sometimes be cruel, but then I hear from kids and I found out that this is a fun thing and that they really enjoy it and they can bring a friend along and they don't have the same kind of pressure. So that was the beginning of making sure that I had the terminology right and that I understood what the best practices were. But then I got really practical. And then I knew that I wanted to cover a number of speech differences. And in fact, that has been an ongoing point of what I say, something I really wanted to get right because I knew the title was My S's Our Message, right? I just knew I had to say that, but I didn't want for people to think it was only about lists. So I worked really, really hard on the subtitle. When your voice doesn't obey what you're trying to say, it's okay. But then, of course, it's more than just the title and the cover page. So speech language pathologists helped us cover a number of different speech differences. I had a group of people like a focus group help me with which letters and sounds we should focus on and make sure that we included. And then when I wanted to describe things like selective mutism or aphasia, that sort of thing, I'd run it by them and get their reviews. So I'm really, really proud of the reviews I have in the front of the book. And I'm really, really pleased that it comes from communication experts, including speech language pathologists, but also children with speech differences. And the other thing that was really cool to work on with the speech language pathology community is we did some pages that work as speech therapy. So we put combination sounds. So there's like an S and then S combination sounds. There's an L, what if I don't pass it? Well, there's the R. The R is hiding in the tree, and then these are R combination sounds. There's a page with L and L combination sounds. So gave it out to different speech language pathologists and said, here, how would you use this in your practice? It's really exciting.
That's so cool. I love that. So in your book, there's a point where the protagonist finds that they are a world champion. Listener, you just mentioned that because of their speech challenges. Can you tell more about that turning point and what does that mean to you and to your audience?
Right. So I love that the book can be used on multiple levels. So it can just be fun. It's just a fun read. And I've been pleasantly surprised at how many people bought it just because they like it and they don't have a speech difference or know anyone that does. Sometimes they particularly like alphabet stories, but not necessarily, right? So the experience on its own is a fun read. But then it also works as empathy building, and especially because it's in the first person, right? So my L's run away, turn into W's. What can I say? And then we keep going, right? And then it can be used, like I mentioned, for speech therapy. But there's also this turning point. So after we establish like the various ways that there are challenges with saying certain sounds or being understood or having our sounds skip or get stuck or so up in between. Then we segue into, but you want to know what's great? Want to hear what's cool? My sounds have taught me something I didn't learn in school. So then we start from the foundation of I understand what that's like to, hey, but here's something that's really good about it. And have you ever thought about it this way? It has some real advantages, right? And then we segue from that into how do we work together and how do we communicate? And there's so many ways to communicate. So we can write, draw, sing, or dance. And that's one of my favorite pages because we actually have a child who's signing, that's just something to jump. And we talk about all the different ways that we can talk and that when we work together, it's no big deal because we can speak heart to heart. So I feel like there's a universality there. Of course, we're really highlighting the particulars of having trouble with the creation of sounds or the way that a sentence is structured. But the universality of it's sometimes challenging to communicate, but when we have patience with each other and we listen well and we are determined, I hear you and you hear me and we decide to do it, then we can always find a way to work together. And I just find like that is such a powerful message. So when I'm doing readings of students and stuff, I, I think it's, every time, if not, it's certainly almost every time, that will be where people go, oh, and that will be the one that everybody says, yeah, that's right. We can all work together. And, just such a great message to put out into the world. And I think it needs saying in every context, socially, politically, in all of our differences and all of our dealings. And so again, maybe this is a way that people that have a speech difference that represent that diversity in our community in that particular way. Maybe it's the way we can lead the conversation, ironically, right? Like everybody, we can all hear each other. We can all listen. We can all be patient with each other. We can all speak. We can all just set aside any difficulties. And also we can all maybe work a little bit harder, right? Like in this book, the kids are working really hard and there's a little subtle message in there about, hey, those of you that don't have speech challenges, you could put a little bit more effort into the conversation too, right? And then we're working together. And because of that, we're all better for it.
Yeah, I love that because you're gonna probably get like parents buying it, or maybe like a speech therapist buys it for a family, and it's like as they're reading, that subtle message is gonna come out for
Yeah.
parents. Yeah. I have a friend, her daughter's around the same age as my daughter, around 3.5. The sound errors are age appropriate, but dad, her husband, is like, I can't understand. And then we'll kind of like cut her off a little bit pretty quickly. And so I just talked to my friend about how he can be more of an active listener and talk slower and be more patient and just give her time to communicate because mom and I like it's totally fine. Like we can understand everything. And I also told him maybe he should get his hearing checked too. But she was like, I never even thought about that. But she has had multiple like speech screenings. And of course, you could work on those sounds. It doesn't hurt to work on them, but it's all age appropriate. And it's all like in the past like few months, like I've known them for years, but every time I see them, it gets better and better. So yeah, I think that it's important for the family members to also participate in that treatment process.
Yeah, you touch on so many good points there. And I'm really want to highlight the one about, well, maybe you should get your hearing checked because that has happened for many, many times. And for many of us too, that it kind of can run in families. And so I think, it's fascinating. You'll know better than I, and so will your audience that are speech language pathologists. But my understanding is that, we hear sounds best when we make them ourselves, which is why babies babble so much, right?
Mhm.
And then we speak back. And so like if there's been any challenges in your home, that might actually be perpetuated, whether it's genetic or not. It might be about the exchange between
Mm.
a parent that is hard of hearing. I had a father who was a mechanic and he was a very loud person. I did something really sneaky in here. I threw in a doozy of a tongue twister. There's a few, but I threw in one that's really, really hard. And this is one of my favorite pages. And one of the reasons I did that was my hope was that you would have a parent or a caregiver of some point, and they're sitting down and they think this book is for their children and they're reading and they're giggling and they're doing what they're doing. And then they get to this page and their tongue trips because it's a hard one. It's a doozy. And then hopefully the light bulb goes on and they go, aha, that's what
Yeah.
it's like, right?
Oh, I
It's
love
just
that.
as hard for my kid to make the S sound or the R sound or the T sound as it is for me to say this doozy of a tongue twister, right?
Yeah. Oh, I think I'm gonna buy that book for my friend because that's a
Awesome.
sound like
Yay.
the 3.5-year-old is having trouble with, which, it's a hard sound anyway.
It is.
Um,
It is. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then you talked about like that age appropriate delay, and I think that's a really important point too, is that, most people will outgrow them, but what's way harder to outgrow is anxiety. And so can we think about the mental health of the child that is having a little challenge ahead of thinking about the correctness of
Mm.
pronunciation? So we talked earlier about the word pictures, and one of the first ones that came up for me was that idea of like jumping hurdles. And for me, even as an adult with a very grown up professional career in corporate environments, just an everyday occurrence that people interrupt me
Mm.
or correct me. And, it's kind of shocking to me, like, surely logically, they know that speaking the word back to me the way that they say it is not going to correct it. Like, you think I've never
Try
had that
that.
happen
Yeah.
before? You
Yeah.
think you think that you just saying it to me is going to make me magically be able to say it back, right?
Right.
So just and again, like, coming from a place of grace and space, most people are trying to help, right? They
Mhm.
come from like a really good place, but that good place, I think can be really, really misguided, because I think there is something about human nature, and especially working with young ones, where
Mhm.
we feel like, okay, we need to correct. And this isn't the kind of correction that we do when we, for example, want to make sure a child looks both ways and holds your hand before they cross the street,
Right.
right? This is the kind of correction that is singling them out for how they are present in the world and how they engage with other human beings. And so if your experience from a very young, tender age is every time you try to speak, people are like stopping you,
Mm.
correcting you, and speaking for you, or putting a hurdle, putting a barrier there, it makes it more difficult. And I know for me, in my experience, the impact of that, and thank goodness this doesn't happen anymore, doesn't happen as much, but I would also have a lot of feedback where people would literally say, "Oh, she has a lazy month. She has a lazy period," right? And I would just be like so heartbroken. It's like, I'm not lazy. I'm working
Mhm.
so hard. But what it meant was that I became increasingly self-conscious, which
Mhm.
would heighten my as I'm around speaking, and it was more likely that I would stutter. It was more likely that I would have anxiety around a conversation, which ironically, at the beginning, it made me not talk. Like, I didn't speak at all till I was 4. It's the way the story goes in the family. But then the joke is, like, I spent the rest of my life making up for it, right? It just made me kind of
Yeah.
like, you're going to understand me, darn it.
Yeah, once that's amazing. I think this is so important for speech therapists to hear, especially those in early intervention, because so much of what we do focuses on the child and getting them in and you know, starting therapy as soon as possible because you're going to make the most change. But I know we do parent coaching, but how much of that parent coaching is like helping them better support the child versus correcting the child?
Absolutely. And, I almost feel like there needs to be a forum or a time of day, or like some sort of situation created for a child where you would say, like, we're only going to correct you at this time. So we're going to work on our
Mm.
sounds together for an hour after dinner. And during that time, I'll correct you. Outside of that, I won't. Or maybe it's the other time. Maybe you say, like, I'm gonna help you with these sounds, but when we're at the dinner table and we're just having a conversation, that will be a correction-free zone.
Mhm.
Something like that,
I
I
like
think
that,
would be
yeah.
really helpful. Yeah.
That's a great tip. Oh my gosh, this is so great. Like, I really, really love that idea. I think that's so awesome. Sherry, I hope this is not the last time that we speak because this was wonderful. And I think that there's a big gap in our field missing from first person perspectives. Like we have Jordan Levon, who has been educating us about childhood apraxia of speech. We have autistic individuals who are coming into the fold, but I think someone who understand what it's like to have a speech sound disorder would be so helpful for our community. So thank you for coming on.
I'm so happy to hear that, and I do have to say it really was a part of my decision to write this book. I couldn't find any books written for children by someone who still has a speech sound disorder. Like it's still my lived experience every day. And there are a few out there, but the ones that I found were maybe a little bit for older children.
Mm.
And I wanted to do something that was light and that was really a conversation starter and that was going to be focused. I'll let the experts be the experts.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for you
But
guys. And
you're the
again,
expert. But you are.
yeah,
I don't
but
mean to interrupt you, but you are. You
yeah,
have the lived
exactly.
experience.
Exactly. So we're experts in different ways. Yeah. So how do we say that?
Yeah.
So I'll let you be the expert in the science and the methodology. And
Okay.
I'm so grateful for this community. And I'm so pleasantly, well, maybe not surprised, but I'm so pleased to see the growth in the community since the last time I was in speech therapy. But yes, I will absolutely step in and to this and own it. And it's been such a wonderful part of my journey to be transparent and to start speaking about it. And it's like this universality that we know is true, but it's always surprising. Like I did it to help others, but my goodness, it's been such a help and a healing experience to me too. So thank you again.
That's great. Sherry, where can people get your book and then where can they find and connect with you?
Wonderful. So my book is available like basically wherever books are sold. So the ones that people are probably most familiar with would be Amazon. So Amazon wherever you are. It's also available through Indigo Chapters if you're Canadian. And I believe it's available at Barnes and Noble and all of the big players. You can also go to my website at sherrymcmillan.ca and I will list retailers there for you. And that is where you can contact me, of course. So there's a contact us button on that site. And you can also subscribe to my mailing list. And then if you're on social media, I am Sherry McMillan Writes, like a writer, author, WRITES, on Instagram and Facebook.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sherry.
Thank you so much for having me, Benita.
Thank you so much for listening. By the way, have you joined the SSU crew yet? By joining, you get access to the free goods section on our website, plus podcast updates, special event notifications, and therapy inspiration. You can sign up at bit.ly/join SSU crew, all lowercase, or just find the link in this episode description. Also, don't forget to take a screenshot of this episode so that you can always refer back to it and share it on social media if you really love the topic. Take care and remember to always fill your speechy side cup first before you can pour into others.